Hello and welcome into the KE Report. I'm your host, Shad Markwitz, and today we're getting an update from West Red Lake Gold Mines, traded on the TSX.V under the ticker WRLG, and on the OTCQB under the ticker WRLGF. And I'm joined today with the Vice President of Exploration at West Red Lake Gold Mines, Will Robinson. And Will, great to get you on the show as always. It seems like we always have something fun to discuss as far as the exploration potential. Last time we were talking about four of the newer targets that you've been going after, like Upper 8, MJ, North Venus, and North Shore. This time, we're going to hone in on a area of the deposit that maybe some people aren't familiar with, and that's the Fork deposit at the Madsen property. And this part of the property has had some historic drilling on it. You've actually got about 70,000 ounces defined historically based on 20,000 in indicated and about 50,000 in inferred at this Fork area. But you've highlighted in a press release just on December the 10th that this is a new area of focus for the company because it actually could be an area you could drift over to in a development scenario. And I don't think we've ever talked about it on the show before, but you've got some resources here. There's some high-grade intercepts historically that you accent on this press release from the 10th, but maybe give us an idea of how this would actually play into the overall development scenario at Madsen.
Yeah, for sure, Shad. Thanks. Good morning. This process sort of started with us taking a look at some of the near mine satellite resources that we have on the books. And as you said, that includes Fork, Russet, and Wedge. And we wanted to take another look to see if there's any opportunities within those areas to focus on, higher grade portions of those resources, potentially isolate those higher grade pockets to make them a little bit more economically attractive. And the one that immediately stood out to us was Fork. And so basically we reinterpreted the domains a little bit and just focused on this very high grade portion of the overall resource. And by isolating that and having it be in such close proximity to the existing underground workings at Madsen, we think that it's something that could become a satellite feed source in a fairly short amount of time. And so that's why it's particularly exciting for us.
Well, and let's dig into some of the grades that you did see here because you're saying, in a sense, that there's an overall broad area of mineralization, but then within that, there are some of these high grade hits in here over really good widths. So I guess separate the wheat from the chaff for us. What are the high grade broad areas, and then what are the high grade areas that you really want to hone in on?
Yeah, so it was previously interpreted, with like you said, pretty broad domains that overall were fairly, intermediate grade as compared to even the main Madsen deposit, which is closer to 7 grams per ton. The overall Fork resource currently sits at, 5.3 in the indicated and 5.2 grams in the inferred, with about 70,000 ounces all in. And so what we were trying to do is basically focus in on this one high grade shoot area, which is sort of a splay north-south trending, zone of mineralization, not too dissimilar from something like McVeigh or North Austin. It kind of fits within that structural framework at Madsen on that 1 kilometer spacing. And but like you said, from the historic intercepts that we were seeing, we kind of realized quite quickly that there was a lot of potential here, and this thing has a lot of similarities to something like at this point it's a smaller version of Rowan, for instance, where it's vein hosted mineralization, a little bit narrow in places, but some of these intercepts were quite nice as far as thickness as well. I mean, 13 meters at 14 grams per ton, 9 meters at 8 grams per ton, and so on. We highlighted a few of those intercepts, and even though we flagged this drilling as historic within the press release, it's really not too historic. It's fairly modern drilling. The oldest hole that we have in there that we used to kind of create this new domain and constrain this high grade shoot was from 2004. And so we have drilling from 2004 to 2017, even some, pure gold era drilling within this zone, which gives us a lot more confidence about the viability of those intercepts. We have, assay certificates for them. The survey quality and control is quite good. And so we have a lot of confidence in just looking at the grade distribution and then some of the gaps, within some of the high grade hits within the current domain gives us a lot of confidence that we can go back and define this thing further. And if you look at some of the figures that we've included in the press release, figure 3, for example, which is sort of a zoomed in long section of the vein, it still remains wide open down to the south with a couple of hits outside the current domain as we have it modeled. And so there is expansion potential as well, just within this, smaller high grade zone. But when I say small, I mean we currently have, those fairly modern drill intercepts defining an area of 400 meters by 250 meters, which is fairly significant. And we're estimating an average thickness around 2 meters overall. But I feel that that's conservative, just looking at some of the intercepts that we have within the domain as it's currently defined. And one of the other exciting things about Fork in my mind is that we can go in and we can drill this out and define it quite effectively from surface with very shallow drill holes on the average of 150 to 250 meters. And so, with a fairly quick program, we could go in, get good tight spacing on this, define it more effectively, and even add some expansion meters to it as well, and hopefully grow it, get it up to a higher, classification of confidence, and then potentially even in the measured category. And then it's only 250 meters from the underground development at McVeigh. And so this is an area, if we were to average 6 meters a day, which is a conservative estimate for development rates, we could be to this new higher grade area within about 2 months of development. And that's assuming all the drilling pans out and our, cash flow models and things show that it is beneficial to go after this thing. But it's quite exciting because it could provide, a near mine, near term satellite feed source of high grade material to the main Madsen mine, right as we're starting to ramp everything up and go back into production in 2025.
Well, Will, two big comments there to respond to. One, that you could drill it from surface pretty effectively, which is different than some of the other targets we've talked about that really are going to require underground drilling. So the fact that it's that shallow and you could drill it from surface and expand it and better define it is a huge plus. And we'll definitely put an image of that figure 3 in there. But I'm going to put an image of figure 2 below this interview as well for people just to see how close it is. And you can actually see it in figure 3. There's actually a black arrow in the upper right-hand side where you can actually see how close it is, 250 meters to McVeigh. And so McVeigh, for people listening in, if you're not familiar, was where Pure Gold was working. There was some development underground already put in place. And you're essentially saying that you could drift over to this Fork deposit area if it looks like it's worth the candle in about 2 months' time in a development scenario. So maybe put a little more color on that. What could that mean as far as maybe a fifth contributing area here? Because you've got North Austin, Austin, South Austin, McVeigh. Could Fork be number 5 that you contribute to the mining scenario?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things to hit home on that too, as well, is since it's underground and since we would be developing out to this target in fairly short order from underground, all the permitting hurdles, from any sort of new decline or new sort of pit source on any sort of satellite feed, all of those things are cut out of the equation. So it's very streamlined to get this into the production profile at the mine, if and when we go to make that decision. So that's one of the things that definitely makes it quite attractive.
Well, and we'll just scanning back from Fork for a second. I'll also put image 1 on there. We've talked about figure 2 and figure 3. Figure 1 just shows the overall map and the overall Madsen surface expression and exploration programs. But you can see the Fork splay noted on there. But you can also see some of those other targets that you talked about at the onset, the Russet area and also the Wedge area, which has the MJ target in it. Do you think those could also, if more drilling was done, be potential other areas to develop? How would those compare to this Fork area, Russet and Wedge?
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of potential in the other satellite, resources as well. Russet, Wedge, MJ for sure. They're just a little bit further away from the mine. So as far as the process for, getting those approved for additional development, those would probably be, separate declines, for instance, and require separate portals. And so there's a little bit, more moving parts and a permitting process involved with those. So those would be, 2 to 3 years out in the timeline, potentially a little bit further out than something like Rowan or 8 Zone Deep. But what Fort can do for us potentially is give us that high grade feed even sooner than something like 8 Zone Deep, within potentially the first year or into the second year of the production profile at Madsen. And one of the other things I think that's important to point out about Fork is it was never historically mined. And so there's no remnant workings around Fork, which makes it a much more, straightforward deposit potentially that we could go after, just thinking about the operations side of things.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. So some of the other areas like Russet and Wedge would need their own declines, and then even the upper 8 area or the 8 Zone Deep, those areas take a little more work to get to. I think the advantage here with Fork is that you could get to it pretty quick. 2 months is not long in a mining scenario term. And the fact that there's some high grade ounces there that could even be further defined by more drilling is an exciting area. It's an exciting target for expansion, but it could be a development target that comes nearer in the mine plan than some of the other targets we've talked about in the past. So I guess anything else you'd want to leave listeners with today as far as this Fork area? And do you have a rough plan of what the follow-up program will be if you want to do some drilling from surface?
Yeah, I think what you pointed out there is really good. Another message to kind of get out there and hit home on is really it is exciting. These areas that we're defining close to the mine now, upper eight being a new target, a new discovery, if you will, that we've made with our first round of regional drilling on the property. The way that we're looking at and envisioning or re-envisioning these different deposits and resources that are close to the mine, these brownfield type things that we can bring into the production profile. I think it's very exciting. And these all seem small individually, but when you start putting them all together, they really can move the needle for something like Madsen. And those types of stepping stones are really what are going to allow us to increase our production profile at Madsen, from a 50 to 60,000 ounce per year producer up to potentially 100,000 ounce per year producers, bringing in these satellite higher grade feed sources. And so that's really sort of our trajectory and the strategy that we're looking to execute. And as far as the program for Fork, yeah, we've already got a program planned. We're looking to execute in 2025 by mid-year on that. And it's not going to take a lot of meters to really get good definition and even some expansion on Fork. So we're looking at 2,000 to 3,000 meters, which could be accomplished within about a month or a little more, 4 to 5 weeks of drilling. And that should give us enough information to do a follow-up sort of in-house estimate on that and understand, how economically attractive it is. And then again, we could make a decision fairly quickly on whether, we start developing out to Fork, and that's ultimately going to determine how soon it can come into the production profile at the mine. But having all of these things kind of coming together right at this pivotal moment for the company when we're just on the hinge of restarting and having some of these new high grade things come into the picture is quite exciting.
Well, I appreciate you putting a little more color on the Fork deposit area, some of the maybe follow-up drilling there, 2,000 to 3,000 meters for next year. And we'll definitely keep tabs on that. And then, all these other targets and all these other new areas that you've been exploring and some of the old known areas all weaving together into a patchwork of different deposits that could pull together from multiple sources in a mining scenario. And it just shows that there's a lot of mineral endowment still to be uncovered here in the Madsen area. And we haven't even talked about Rowan in this call, which is yet another satellite area to bring into the mining scenario down the road. So a lot of things pulling together for West Red Lake Gold as they're moving towards the development path into production next year. We'll definitely keep tabs on it. And for those listening in, if you want to follow along with all the news when it hits the wires, definitely click on the link below this interview. Takes you right over to the West Red Lake Gold Mines website, straight to their news section, so you too can follow along. We'll keep us posted as more drill news comes out. We'll get you back on for an update. And as always, looking forward to our next conversation.
Hey, thanks so much, Chad. Great as always.